Slaughtering animals, and especially humans, to gain the favor of gods is something people in civilized societies consider barbaric, disgusting, and yes, even evil. Yet for some reason, despite the God of the Bible supposedly being all-powerful, he was unable to forgive his followers unless they killed and burned animals for him. Make an altar of earth for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. And, in fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness. And several times throughout Leviticus, it is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. That's right, God enjoys the smell of burning flesh. But it doesn't stop there. God even accepted human sacrifices. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter? And he did to her as he had vowed. Since God is all-knowing, he knew Jephthah's daughter would be the one to walk out to meet her father. Yet even though God was supposedly against human sacrifice, he still carried out his end of the bargain by helping Jephthah defeat his enemies. Jephthah then fulfilled his part by making a burnt offering of his daughter, which meant he slit her throat, skinned, dismembered, gutted, and roasted her so that God could enjoy the smell. God could have simply turned the deal down or stopped Jephthah before he murdered his daughter, but he didn't. Instead, he let an innocent girl be sacrificed to him, a girl that had done nothing to deserve such abuse. And for those who still insist that God didn't accept human sacrifices, consider the act Christians believe is central to their faith. And by that will, we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. Here, God's repulsive desire for sacrifices culminated in his demand that his own son hang from a cross until dead. God wanted Jesus to be sacrificed. That was the only way he would allow humans to be saved. Again, this despite his supposedly being all-powerful and thus by definition capable of forgiving people without requiring them to commit murder. In the Ten Commandments, God demands that people not kill, and then he turns around and requires people to kill in order for him to forgive them. What sense does that make? And isn't that more than a little hypocritical of God, considering all of the murders he's committed? Some people believe that torture committed to acquire vital information may be justified, but virtually everyone would agree that torture committed for no other reason than to cause pain and suffering is simply evil. Yet God orders torture for the sole purpose of inflicting suffering upon others. Not to acquire vital information, not to convince someone to behave better in the future, not any goal other than to cause gratuitous agony. They were not given power to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes a man. During those days men will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. But worse than that is what happens in hell. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. The dead were judged according to what they had done as recorded in the books. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Biblical literalists take this as meaning that those whom God does not save will be tortured for all eternity, with no hope of redemption. But what is the point of eternal torment other than to cause misery for misery's sake? What act could be more evil? Wouldn't a good God simply and mercifully destroy, or perhaps even rehabilitate, those souls not destined for heaven? Why allow them to suffer if there's no redemption? What's the point? Even for those who believe that hell isn't eternal for most human souls, the passage clearly states that the devil, beast, and false prophet will be tortured forever. Again, no matter how evil they may be, what's the point of causing them such incredible suffering? Does God enjoy watching them suffer? If not, then why does he do it? These are not questions that a moral person can simply ignore. Few behaviors are considered more evil than abusing children, the most innocent among us. Yet throughout the Bible, God shows a callous disregard toward them. For example, "Then God said, 'Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about.' Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son." God did stop Abraham at the last moment, but imagine the experience from Isaac's point of view. He saw his own father come after him with a knife, fully prepared to murder him in the name of God. That's a memory he surely had seared into his brain for the rest of his life. I'd call that child abuse. Now some may say that although the passage implies Isaac was a child, it is possible he was actually an adult, in which case this wouldn't have been child abuse. Sure, that's conceivable, but how would that make God's behavior toward Isaac any less evil? This, however, is an undeniable example of God directly abusing children. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon. While it is possible God killed those children instantly without causing them to suffer, that doesn't mean God didn't abuse them. And here's an example where God made a child sick and took a week to kill him. "And the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. David therefore besought God for the child, and it came to pass on the 7th day that the child died." Although God was punishing David, he inflicted the sickness on his child. The child had done nothing wrong, but God made him suffer and killed him anyway. And sometimes God slaughtered children in particularly gruesome, painful, and terrifying ways. "And as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. And he turned back, and looked on them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tare 42 children of them." Just because a bunch of kids mocked a prophet, God sent a couple of bears to tear them to pieces. How can such an act be considered anything but evil? A few later translations of the Bible replace the term little children with youths or boys, to imply that the children could have been teenagers. Even with the change, what kind of justice includes sending bears to tear up kids just because they make fun of somebody? Many people consider animal abuse to be as evil as child abuse, yet at various times in the Bible, God shows cruel indifference to animal suffering. Apart from his frequent desire to have them sacrificed to him, he also orders them to be maimed. "The Lord said to Joshua, Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them over to Israel, slain. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." If God had ordered Joshua to simply kill the horses, it would have been far more humane than slashing their leg muscles to cripple them and cause them to die slow, lingering deaths. But God also personally slaughtered countless billions of animals in the Great Flood. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. The animals had done nothing wrong, nothing to offend God, yet he sent them all to a terrifying death by drowning. Of course, being all-powerful, God could have killed the humans in a way that spared the animals such an unnecessary and brutal death. But he didn't bother.